Sydney's a really funny city to make it in. What worries me is the younger generation.
The generation today, there isn't that resilience.
What do you do to keep your mind okay?
I think anxiety is all about overthinking and people constantly thinking where they should be at and what they should be doing. Never compare yourself to someone because you just never know what tomorrow brings.
Your marriage seems incredible. I look around and I'm divorced. Most people I know are divorced.
I've seen so many people have everything and overnight have nothing.
Can we talk about Real Housewives of Sydney?
I will never regret in life not taking an opportunity. And that's what I say to the kids. Always exhaust that opportunity.
How do you make sure your kids are tough and resilient?
They can hate us because you know what? I'm not your friend. At the end of the day, I'm your parent.
Krissy Marsh is a businesswoman, celebrity, amazing cook, philanthropist, wife and a mother, known for her role on Real Housewives of Sydney and her honest, direct and fun personality. Krissy is much more than a housewife. Beautiful, smart and generous. There's so many layers to Krissy that we can learn from with her infinite wisdom, humour and spirit. Welcome,
Wow.
Krissy Marsh, to the
I think
intro.
that's one of the best intros.
Do you love it?
Can I take that home and read that out to my family?
I think so. Thank you for paying me for that.
I want to
think
say
you did
like
well.
the beautiful bit. Like, come on, this
I'm
is
going to
great.
ask you about beauty later,
Oh,
but you
yeah.
told me not to. But
Yes.
before we get into what everyone knows you for, which is being this beautiful, famous socialite, one thing I didn't know about you, and I heard this over lunch, was that you used to be in finance.
Yes.
And it was a very male-dominated industry, and in walked the beautiful Krissy, and you were on the trading floor. Tell me
That's why
about
I got
that.
my nickname Beaver.
You're Beaver.
Beaver.
Okay.
So I walked in, back then, like no one looked at your credentials, anything. I was out on a boat sailing in Sydney Harbour and this guy goes, you've got a really quick wit. You've got a quick mouth. He's like, well, you know, what about you getting into foreign exchange? And I was actually studying property at the time. And I thought, well, the property market was, wasn't great. And it was 1987, showing my age. You weren't born then.
I was born. I was one
No,
Krissy.
there you
but
go. You were
yeah.
just born. And yeah, literally the next day I found myself walking into a company called Harlow Butler. There were 100 guys on the floor. I was put on the cable. I had no clue what a cable was.
I don't know
it was,
either.
The English pound.
Okay.
So in Australia, well, even still today, it's quite not, well, obviously now they don't have the English pound. Well, they do again. So, okay, now I'm really rambling. So basically it wasn't a very liquid currency. There was only two people on the desk. One of the guys was Scottish and literally no one could understand him. So in walks this 17-year-old. Someone had watched the Naked Gun movie the night before and goes, nice beaver. And, when she goes, I got it stuffed myself. It was Priscilla Presley. And so then from that day onwards, I was called Beaver.
I'm not sure you get away with that these days.
Yeah, no. And my mum said, I just don't get it, darling. You don't have big teeth.
That's not
I'm like,
funny, though.
Mum, it's got nothing to do with teeth. But I think that was an incredible grounding. When I went in and I started on the cable and then I moved to the Deutschmark, and that was during the unification of Germany. I went from a 2-man desk to a 10-man desk. I was with Chica and Python, like everyone had to have a nickname. It was the full Wolf of Wall Street era. And I think I never really got a hard time until I started doing really well. So back then I was the first computer trader, a guy from Ostericius Landesbank, London, who was a orphan who had got his job being a caddy on a golf. The foreign exchange market, there are just so many stories. So he used to come in when New York opened and, our day either started at 6 or 7. So I'd get there at 6 and I'd have this little green screen and my friend from, all the way in London would, trade with me via computer and I was the only one in the office doing that. And it sort of enabled me to find out where the market was really at prior to everyone else coming in. So then all of a sudden a guy, Schultzinger, unfortunately he's passed away now, but he was one of, the biggest traders with me here because he would see what's happened with the market overnight with this guy from London. So all of a sudden I started to do really well and that's when you really start to cop it. Yeah.
I just
I mean, how many stories is
know
that
that
in
about
one?
you? I think you
Yes.
told me a story that one guy was trading so much and he didn't want to walk away from his desk, so he went to the
Yeah.
toilet
Yeah.
in the bin at his
Yeah.
desk, and that was kind of a moment when you were like, maybe I need to look at something else.
Yeah. And I think my husband just never believed that story. And we ran into Chica, who's now a masseuse, who I used to be in foreign exchange with. And I used to chain smoke sitting beside this poor guy. never smoked. I'm sure if something happens later in life with him, God forbid, I'm going to be responsible for that passive smoking.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think, that constant barrage day in, day out, like, as you said, it wouldn't be allowed to happen now. I used to go to, our offices were in York Street. I used to go to that little park across the road and literally cry for a couple of hours and suck it up and, come back in to work. And I think one thing with the generation today, this Gen Z, there isn't that resilience. Oh, I don't like my job and I can't work from home and I can't do this. And it's like, you know what, guys? Try going over in your lunchtime crying, wiping the tears
Getting
and then
back to
going
it.
back and, and then they just, you silver spoon, what are you wearing your hair like that for, Olivia? What are you doing this for, I'm sure you experienced it when you first went into law.
I think it's an interesting one. Well, it depends how you grow up. And one of my questions for you is, you come from Queensland. Johnny's from Wollongong,
Yes.
I think, right? And I grew up in Tassie. So Sydney's a really funny city to make it in. I feel like you can make it if you want to and you put yourself out there. But what worries me is, A, the younger generation. There's no resilience. And I think if something's hard, they tap out and they walk away from it. Like in your job, you would have just left.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And
Totally.
the younger generation, how do you make sure your kids in this world are tough and resilient?
I think it's exposing them to everything. And I have this conversation with so many parents. I really had an unbelievably blessed childhood, and you almost feel guilty for saying that now because you're meant to have some issues.
Yeah,
and,
adversity.
We grew up on property. We had horses, we were modelling from, age of 2. So we always had this interesting, was it overly privileged? Not at all. My parents were hard workers. I had a job at Suzanne Gray selling all those fluoro go for it t-shirts and, getting $3, not even 3, I think $2.50 an hour. I think work ethic is really important, and how do you instill that? And that's by not giving too much.
Yep.
And I also think showing them the adversities. I've never, when we haven't had money, when we've lost money, I've sort of told my kids that, my sister just put down her dog of 17 years, and one of my good friends, little girl who's, just started school, so she's 5, he's like, I'm not going to tell her. I'm just going to tell her the dog's gone away. And I'm like, well, that's the worst thing you can do.
Yep.
I said, because you're always going to have to deal with death.
Yep.
You're going to have to deal with these things in life. So that little dog dying is going to teach her for greater things in life. And I think that's what's really important. And that's how you teach the value of money. I say to my kids, I don't squeeze the end out of the toothpaste. For no reason, and it does my husband's head in, but I can get cut it off. I can get a good 5 more times.
Yeah, roll it
and
out.
that's the best thing when you get a quote. And I say to the kids, I show them by example.
Yep.
I get 3 quotes on something, and I say to the guy, I don't squeeze the end out of my toothpaste to be ripped off. So I think you've really got to expose them to as much as you can. And I think Ronald McDonald House and people go, oh, I want to go bring my kids in charity, and they top them down there, but. Really getting involved in community.
In a genuine way.
Genuinely helping, the neighbours. I say to them, go and take the neighbour's bin in, they're older. Go and, those constant little things. And it's so easy to not give a shit about the $1.15 of Apple that they've just bought some game on, or it's so easy to do that.
Particularly in the East. You do live in a certain social set, in a bubble in the eastern suburbs where people are nuts, right? It's not the real world to most people.
And this 13-year-olds wearing Gucci shoes.
Oh, and the rest.
Yeah.
I see them in double bay on a Saturday night, head to toe glamour. Boys have got Rolexes, the girls have got Prada bags. How do you not participate in that without making your kid a loser, right?
Yeah. Well, not at all, because a brand isn't ever going to make them successful, or a brand's never going to. And I love that. Milana, gives out so many of her clothes to friends, and they're always borrowing, and they'll wear things more than once. I gave her a Gucci bag when she was 17, which was one of my old ones, only because it was one of the originals that you can't see a label.
Yeah.
I never want, any of my kids to aspire to that. Billy's, now 22. Oh, look, he got, some Gucci shoes, but that's fine.
Yeah.
But I just don't want them aspiring, working these hard jobs and then, going and blowing it on a, piece of designer. It's different, I do have nice things now.
Yep.
And I do love nice things, but when I was younger, I'd much prefer to buy a property. Someone said to me the other day, oh, aren't you embarrassed? Your car is so old now.
Oh, what, last
and
year?
I went, no, I actually have 3 dogs I put in and I wash it. And I actually prefer to buy a property
Yeah.
than to go and buy a new car. So I think you got to show them your priorities.
Totally.
And that is only from example. It doesn't come from school. It's got to come from home.
I think school is where they're going to see the best and the worst. And it's just about getting them in that middle ground. You can have nice things, but you've got to be a good person. I think that's really important. And you mentioned buying property. Now, you were a commercial real estate agent, which is probably something that not many people know
shifter.
about. Shed shifter.
Shed shifter.
I love that. Krissy, the shed shifter.
Even more hardcore than commercial, because most women went into commercial. And that's what the guy from Jones Lang, when I interviewed. And I said, oh, okay, I don't think that's for me. I said, I really like the industrial because I'd worked for Ritz-Carlton Hotels.
Okay.
So I was associate director there. I didn't start as that, but, found my way up. So I really knew all the people, like, the Moss family, like all the Terrace Tower group, all of those people from staying at the hotel, the Goodmans. So they all had industrial property in Alexandria, Mascot, Botany. So I'm like, why would I go in and try and do the commercial market, who I know no one? Whereas I'm really connected in this whole Alexandria, Mascot, Botany. I was selling tanneries one day, I'd be motor mechanic the next day I'd be dealing with, Toshiba. So it was always very varied, and that's what I loved about that whole industry.
It just blows my mind. Like, your background is, it's hilariously great. Like, it's just so diverse.
I did valuation, so that's what I had always studied, because my dad said, I wanted to go and model, and he's like, that'll dry up, before you know it. And I'm like, yeah, but I want to try it as long as I can. He's like, well, you've got to study something. So then I started doing my property economics and ended up becoming a valuer. So whilst I was doing foreign exchange and then the market still hadn't picked up, I went to Ritz-Carlton Hotels and I ended up working in their top 9 out of 10 in the world sales. And then I started my own agency after getting into property. So, yeah.
It's an amazing career. And I think we'll talk about Real Housewives of Sydney in a minute, because people probably have you penciled in a certain category.
I love that.
I love it too. Surprise and delight. And I want to talk to you about that. But just on property before we move on, have we made it impossible for the average person to buy a property in Sydney? Do they have to give up avocado on toast?
Yeah.
Has the dream gone? Talk to me about it.
Look, I think it is exceptionally difficult. I think, I look at Billy, for example, he's 22. I bought my first property at 17. And, I'm talking about a $90,000 property in Brisbane that I'm buying with 3 other people, my sisters. So there was 4 of us. I definitely think, you have to have some assistance or look in areas like, emerging markets like Wollongong, Queensland, different places like that. And if you're still living at home and you're on a reasonable salary, I think it's possible to still buy but not live there.
Yes.
So that's the thing. You've got to still be sponging off your parents, living at home, but then using the rent, which won't cover the mortgage.
Mm-hmm.
So then you've got to have enough in your wage to be able to top it up, to be able to expect. I mean, just say you want to, buy an $800,000 property.
Yeah.
You've got to be, renting it out for $1,000 a week and then topping it up, $3,000 a week with your wage. So it's a lot with trying to live in Sydney as well.
It's really hard.
But I don't think it's impossible. You've got to look at the alternatives of going in with friends and a family and, just making it happen.
And commuting and living in less. I mean, my first house I bought in Sydney was in Botany. And I remember people saying, where? Like, where is that?
Oh, my gosh,
like,
Botany now, prices are crazy.
It was a crazy thing. It was brilliant, right? And I always say to people, look at the radius. How far away is it from things? What's in the amenity in the area? And if you can get to Sydney in under, an hour to get to work, then fine.
Yeah.
Great. But people aren't necessarily prepared to live somewhere less desirable than where they want to.
Yes,
so I think it's about, if you want to have an apartment in Double Bay as your first purchase, it's a matter for you. But if you're prepared to take that money and put a little bit elsewhere, you may actually get a semi.
And also get the capital growth, and then all of a sudden, you start moving. And look, it's the only thing we don't get taxed on. And I think that's the biggest thing is your for now. But I think your principal place of residence, if you can, even if you start off with an investment property and you might get taxed on that, but then that might give you enough to then give you your start.
Yeah.
And look, I think out of anything, I just love property. I remember the first time I bought News Corp shares and I had to sell them, and it was like $3.15. I'd lost sort of 50 cents per share. And I'm like, oh my God, how does that happen?
Yeah.
I find equities, I mean, I do have some, but I just find it gambling. I mean, really.
It is, unless
does
you're prepared to
anyone
dedicate.
really know? Although I'm going a bit
No.
into nuclear at the moment in space, and I've had a bit of luck with that.
With
so.
Tesla shares and
No, no,
SpaceX.
Oklo has
Yeah,
been.
okay.
Anyone want to buy them? Help the share price go up, but they're a goodie.
You
They're
are
a nuclear. So
endlessly surprising. So can we talk about what you're very well known for in Sydney, which is Real Housewives of Sydney? You are incredibly intelligent, right? I'm not going to judge all your
yeah,
castmates.
emotionally intelligent, maybe.
Well, you're direct. You say it like it is. You're not afraid. You stand up for what you believe in. Why'd you go on the show?
Yeah.
What makes you keep coming back?
Look, I have always done television. I've always been modelling with my sisters in Brisbane. I moved down to Sydney. I had my own children's show when I was 15. Moved down to Sydney, still modelling. Went over to China, sold my business, moved over there with my husband. And then I moved the kids back very suddenly. We were always planning on living in China, like indefinitely, but didn't realise that the kids, weren't coping. It was very, very difficult for them. So came back very suddenly and, I had time on my hands and I'm walking down the street with my two little poodles and, one of my girlfriends yells out, why don't you do this show? And I'm like, oh, please, as if I'd do that. And I called my husband in China, Johnny, and he's just so supportive of anything I want to do. And he goes, you're made for it. You're built for it. And it's interesting. I've had a few people really big judgy about it. And I'm like, what are you doing? What's your wife doing? What chances have you taken? And I think I will never regret in life not taking an opportunity. And that's what I say to the kids, always try it, always exhaust that opportunity. So about the modelling, one of my girlfriends got a contract for Ford in New York. She was a Brisbane girl also.
Wow.
And, I'm sort of sitting there struggling, getting jobs, modelling jobs. Clearly she's like, Vogue cover, all that $500,000 contract. You sort of know then, okay, I've exhausted that, I've exhausted that avenue. And I'm a big believer is you've got to be happy.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I decided I'm not going back to Housewives.
Okay.
Because for me, I've done 3 seasons and for me, job satisfaction is everything.
Yeah. I think you're entering on a high
and
note.
this is a job.
It is a job.
It's a job.
It is, but people don't realise that.
A lot of people don't understand that.
But I think this is genuinely how you and this community of women behave on a day-to-day basis, and this is your real life.
Worse.
It's probably worse. For some of them it is, though.
Yeah.
And you have a lot more depth to you and you do a lot more. And
I love that.
Well, you do.
Can we keep that recording?
We can. You have a lot more depth than all the other housewives, and you are our favourite.
Yes.
But you are, because you've just proven that with all the things that you've talked about. China, go back to that. You can speak Mandarin.
Yes, I can, although my kids say it's a bit Chinglish because I sort of mix the Italian. I think where the language portion comes from.
Yeah.
My daughter's, Milana's doing it for a HSC and
oh, wow.
She speaks really, really well. Look, it's good enough to go down to the Double Bay Alterationists and get half prices when I want things and tell her that I want it tomorrow. And, so I still, you have to learn
Points
it over
for
there
effort.
to survive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is I can't speak any other languages apart from bad French. But I think even a little bit of French helps you get in the door when you're away.
Yeah.
So charity work, you touched briefly on Ronald McDonald House before, and I first met you there. You do incredible work for charity. You've got a cookbook, all proceeds go to the house, which is phenomenal. Why? Why does that matter?
Yeah.
Why does that matter to you?
Milana really got me involved in Ronald McDonald House, and it's sort of our thing. So most of the stuff that we actually do, we never show. So it's like bringing out the little dogs in. It might be cleaning bee. It might be, we go in and cook at the house. So a lot of those things, that's sort of Milana and I's thing. But then once I got involved and once I saw how lean this charity was and how much they do and how involved you can be, because it's something to give money, which is fine. But for me, I always wanted to be a lot more than that. And, it took me 3 months to find the contact at Sunrise. Now we get our rice for free.
That's
the
cool.
people from Muti, then we get our tomatoes, for free. So it's all those layers within the house that you can get involved in.
Yeah.
And, it just makes you feel good.
Yeah, it
like
does.
It's a little bit selfish. I remember the day that, I'm building at Double Bay and the joinery came and it was the wrong colour and it was duck egg blue and it was meant to be another colour. And I'm like, oh my God. And then I had to go to the house. This woman's pulled up from Dubbo. She's just driven X amount of hours. The dialysis machine's in the back of the car. And I'm like, and here I am crying about my duck egg blue.
Yeah.
So I think you walk away from there happy.
Yeah.
It's never a sad place. I mean, it's just,
it's amazing. But I think a lot of people will happily put their paddle up at a charity ball
Yeah.
to, be beat the guy next to them and it's an ego thing, but few actually really want to do it just because
Yeah.
it makes them feel good. I think, do you think on that topic that money changes people? Like, have you
Um,
seen that in people that you've grown up with? You're very
yeah,
successful, you're very
yeah.
wealthy. Do you look around the other people like you and go, oh, you're all a bunch of tossers, or do you choose your own people?
Yeah,
Talk to
look,
me
I
about it.
think any of my friends that I'm around, that I don't choose to be around people like that. But yeah, some people can go to your head and you can, but as my mum says, there's always someone thinner, fatter, richer, poorer. Never compare yourself to someone, because you just never know what tomorrow brings,
That's
and
true.
I've seen so many people have everything
And
and
they lose
overnight
it.
have nothing. So I think it's really important that you keep what's close to you. And like for me, it's my family, but I do a lot of mentoring, and a lot of people don't know this, but probably ages mostly 18 to 25. But I've got a couple of 60-year-olds. I've got a boy in London at the moment.
Cool.
So it's really dealing with this young generation that have so many expectations of themselves,
Yeah.
and don't really know how to get there. So, you being very successful in the legal profession, if I have someone coming along that's looking to get into law, I'll then connect with
Yeah.
you. They'll then chat, sort of really connecting people. And so many of these young people know what they need to do. They just need someone to set it out. So I run a notes on my phone, and a lot of the time afterwards, they're like, oh, and do I pay? I'm like, no, this isn't a pay thing. They're like, why do you do it? I'm like, well, shits and giggles. I'm like, if I'm not doing this, I'll probably be murdering someone. Or, I like to keep really busy.
Yeah.
And it's funny, the way that I meet these people are just extraordinary. And they all find me.
Amazing.
And then will always find that there's some connection. I'm mentoring a young guy at the moment who's just too good to be true on paper. And I said, you've got to be a little bit more. His grandfather was Stan Zemanek, very well-known radio announcer. And Stan came to my 30th birthday. I've known him for years. And all of a sudden, I'm mentoring his grandson through osmosis.
Wow.
Different surname, didn't even realise. And I said to him, listen, you're Australian rower, you're this, you just, he's basically an excelled. I said, but, something's got to tell me that you're human. What have you done? And then I found out he's Stan's grandson. I'm like, well, you've grown up in a revolving door, people around you coming and going, used to talking to all walks of life. I said, you saw him die of brain cancer and you've seen what your grandmother's gone through. Write that in your
that's the
letters
real
to
stuff.
employees,
Yep.
And that's the problem. I think everyone wants to always present too perfect, or then they want to present too many issues. It's like the dating game. It's got to be a fine
Don't start me on
balance.
the dating game. I think that's too stressful for words. But do you think social media, because that's why people want to be perfect, right? They want to put this pristine image on social media that is absolutely not reality. And you said that before, sometimes all that glitters is not gold. Do you think social media is going to seriously mess with younger generations? Are you worried
Yes.
about that?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm really worried about that.
I called myself the Insta whore because I literally had Instagram when it first came out.
Yeah.
I think the comparisons and, since 2009 when the internet became mobile, the, increase in, women and men, young children suiciding and all those sorts of things, it's a direct correlation. So you can't say, is it a fact or isn't? It's 100% fact.
Totally.
But I don't necessarily think it's just an Instagram or a TikTok. I think it's the overuse of a phone and not connecting and communicating. You said,
are you addicted to your phone?
totally.
Yeah, me too.
But I'll use ChatGPT and then I'll be doing this. And then like when I mentor those guys, I'm doing that. So yeah, I am constantly, but then, on a Tuesday night dinner, you said before, you're always entertaining. You've always got people over because young people need that connection. And, I'll be the one that's taking photos on a Tuesday night. None of those guys that come in, I've never said to them, no mobile phones, no this.
Okay.
It's just an unwritten rule. They always come in, they chat. No one even has a phone. Like literally last week, I'm like, my phone's in the kitchen. Is someone take a photo of
Maybe
my
they're
food
over
content?
it. Maybe we're addicted because it's new to us. Maybe that's, I don't know.
I don't know. I think they know when to put it down and, Billy's age group's 22, Nico's 19. I think it sort of peters off.
Yep.
But I think as parents, you've really got to have strict controls. I mean, these kids used to laugh at me. Billy was 17 and I would still, if he had people stay over, I would still take their phones.
Oh, and it's
At
also,
night.
what age do you give them a phone?
Well, mine got it really young because we were
Really?
living in China.
Oh, okay. So you wanted that.
But I mean, look, we had, VPNs and, you could barely get anything on your phone
Yeah,
anyway.
it's a different phone back then.
Yeah. But I just think we as parents have to really monitor. And they can hate us because you know what? I'm not your friend.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, I'm your parent.
Yeah.
And, like I look at my kids now and I've got great relationships with them, but I'm still, K's not for Krissy, it's for Karen. I'm still like,
You're onto them.
Yeah.
You got to be. You drop the
Yeah.
ball, and when they're not watched, that's when
Yeah.
things happen. You talked about the K necklace. You've got lots of beautiful diamonds around the neck. Bit of a change in pace. Talk to me, lab-grown diamonds versus mined. What's your thoughts on this? Because it's just diamonds are devalued.
I know.
Right?
Look, for me, it's like, living in China and there's all those fakes and everything. If you're wearing it, how you feel about it, And look, I mean, this is Zena, a House of Couture, good promo for her. But I think, they pride themselves on doing that. But to say if Milana turned around tomorrow and was going to get engaged to some guy and he bought her a beautiful, I mean, they're not cheap, the lab growns.
No.
And
they're the same. It's
totally look the same.
It's horrifically.
And she could get some massive, I'd say go for it. Who's going to know?
No.
No one's going to know. So look, for me personally, I think that they'll look back on us in our era and go, can you believe they used to spend that money?
It's crazy.
I think that that's sort of, so I'm all for it. I think,
good.
Yeah.
It's funny because I think all of our diamonds that we've all aspired to and brought, they're all worth absolutely nothing now, which has been huge for me.
I don't know.
I think they've dropped a lot.
Yeah. I literally, most of my jewelry I wear, I don't, but I don't have a lot of, people have this earrings and I'm sort of like what you see is, but I love watches and I think things like that, value.
Timeless.
Yeah.
And they mean something
and
to
also
you.
they increase in value.
They do. I guess the last question for you is we talked about mental health, we talked about social media, we talked about the pressure of living in the eastern suburbs and all of this stuff. What do you do to keep your mind okay?
Mental. I go to Ronald McDonald House. I really think about what I can do for others. And I think that's the greatest thing with anxiety, greatest thing, I drop my kids off every single day at school.
Wow.
And when I drop them off, I'd say to them, what are you going to do for someone else today? What are you going to say to that teacher? What are you going to... So it's not about them achieving at school. It's not about them getting the greatest marks. I don't give a shit if they came home with all Ds, and I honestly wouldn't. I would be mortified if someone came home and said, oh, your child didn't let me sit with them or your child didn't do that. So for me, that kindness thing, and look, Milana's doing incredibly well at school because I think if you take the pressure off those things, the boys have done well. One's doing architecture, one's doing property economics.
Awesome.
I think it's important for anyone for mental health. Like I love walking, I love working out, I love cooking, I love connecting with people. But I think the biggest things that we need to do every single day is to wake up and think of something. And my mum calls it the rack, the random act of kindness.
The rack's got a different expression in the suburbs. But okay, we'll move away from that rack into random acts of kindness. Yeah, I really like that.
Yeah, so I think it's important, teach them, doesn't matter from what age. And that's, I think anxiety is all about overthinking and people constantly thinking where they should be at and what they should be doing. And I'm a big believer in goal setting and planning. I'm a ridiculous planner. So I think that is great for mental health.
I've seen you plan all your meals out for the week and everything you're going to do.
Plan the meals for the week. I plan out my entire week. I know where I'm going to be every second of the day. So when today I was going to be running late because the hair colorist wasn't on time.
The hair looks great. We survived.
But I do think, even young kids, I've taught my kids from very young age, they print out their week. They have the little timetable. What am I doing today? What am I doing tomorrow? So that they know in their head, this is what I've got on. And all those things take away the angst. I'm picking you up, I'm taking you to piano, I'm picking you up, I'm taking you here.
Yeah.
They know, oh, you know what, this morning we've got this, this, and this on. So planning, goal setting.
Goal setting.
Goal setting.
I think
like Milana's goals are she's kept them from when she's been 5.
Wow.
I clean my teeth, I clean my face.
Oh, cute.
Little things. They don't have to be mental giant things, but for people to wake up and have a focus in life is the biggest thing. I've had the same thing on my goals. The first thing that's on my goal sheet, and I've had it on for probably 30 years, is I have lemon and hot water every morning.
Okay.
So every morning I go, oh, you got it, Krissy.
Because
you're nailing your goals.
Simple goal,
you are
and you
so
just
good.
It. Why I should do that?
So it's just little things, and I have you don't put, I'm going to exercise 3 times a week. You put, I jog on a Monday, which I never would, but I do Pilates on a Tuesday. It's got to be specific. It's got to be now. And you categorize all your goals. There's got to be personal. There's got to be health. There's got to be work. Nico's managed to save a ridiculous amount of money in his first year, working at a bar, Cabana Bar, because he set it into chunks. How many shifts do I have to do? How many hours do I have to work? How much this in order to get that amount of money?
Cool.
So all that, I think,
it
helps.
Do you do that in your, and I was going to finish, but I have one more question for you. Your marriage seems incredible. Like you seem genuinely happy. You obviously put a lot of effort into it.
Yeah.
You seem to hang out with each other and enjoy each other. Talk to me about, because I look around and I'm divorced. Most people I know are divorced, and it's a
and look, I think who you marry is going to be 95% of your life's happiness.
I think so. If you get it wrong, it's horrific.
Yeah, and look, we have a lot of goals that we do together.
Yep.
I know when we moved to China, packing up the kids and doing all that. So we literally have, like, I've got my goals, he's got his goals. We have it all on 1 or 2 pages.
So he's in the goal setting too?
He's in the goal setting too.
Okay.
Yeah, like he built a $1 billion company from nothing, and, all by doing the goal setting. And it gets down to when a deal's going to happen, what date the deal's going to happen. Like we wrote in 5 years, November 2019, we're going to buy a property in Noosa 5 years earlier when we were living in China. And the settlement just kept getting delayed, and with COVID and all that, and we ended up settling in November 2019. I mean, how anyone picked that date? It was plucked from the sky. We didn't even have the money to buy the house.
Yep.
So I think with the marriage, it's really important that you marry someone with the same value system as you. And Johnny and I are both quite basic. We are in terms of what we believe in. Yeah, in terms of what we believe in terms of what we aspire to do. And I think we're very similar, but we're not. Obviously, I'm loud and obnoxious, and he's quiet and serious. But I do think, we don't sit there and go date night, because that just turns into fight night. So, we'd prefer to have 4 other people at dinner with us. So, I don't sit there and I can choose to be in love. I can choose to hate him tomorrow morning. I could choose to be in love. I choose happy and I choose love. And you can be in love with anyone. You could wake up and go, I hate this. Oh, look at his hair. He's put on a couple of kilos. He's doing this. He's giving me the shits. And I could literally do that every second of the day. My dad always taught me, choose happy, choose love. So I'm like, oh, he's hot. Look at how he treats the kids. Look at how he does this. So I think you've got to always, and that's a difficult thing when you're a weatherproofer. So even when I walk into this room, I'm like, oh, that's not right. That light panel should be here. That should be there. So I'm always looking for faults in buildings, in my home. I like things to be, not perfect. But so in a relationship, it's really important. Don't be a weatherproofer. Don't look for all those faults.
I love these.
Yeah.
I've got so many one-liners from you today.
God.
Don't be a weatherproofer. I talked about the beaver. I talked about racking. And we know that you're not going back to Real Housewives of Sydney, which I think we might have broken that as an exciting piece of news. So thank you. But Krissy, you are a delight, and you are really open and honest, and I really appreciate that. Yeah. And there are many, many layers to you. So thank you for sharing them with us.
I would love to come back on this podcast and actually interview you, because I think you're one of the most amazing, incredible women that I've met.
Thank you.
And how you pivoted after your divorce, and how you did your business, and how you go about, your work. So I'd love to have a role reversal.
I'd love to be interviewed by you, Krissy.
We'd have fun.
I think that we can make that happen.
But we'll have to have a couple of skinny bitches.
I think we'll
is
have
that
some
allowed without
Skinny
Prejudice?
bitches is more than allowed, but I'll have a whiskey. We'll meet you there.
Perfect.
Thank you, Krissy Marsh.
Thank you for having me on.
Thank you.